They say family always comes first, but sometimes family forgets you exist. I'm Margaret, born in 1952 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, back in November 2023, at 71 years old. I thought my son David finally wanted me around for Thanksgiving, not just needing my checkbook. I felt hopeful for the first time in years, but then something happened that shattered every illusion I had about being loved versus being used. Today, at 72 and living peacefully in my own truth, I'm finally sharing this because someone out there needs to hear that you don't have to accept crumbs from people who should give you the whole loaf. If you're listening, drop your location below and hit that subscribe button. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in early November. David's voice carried an unusual warmth when he said, "Mom, we'd really love to have you here for Thanksgiving. This year, not we need you to bring the cranberry sauce, or can you help with the kids? He said they'd love to have me." Those words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket I hadn't felt in years. His wife Sarah had always been polite but distant, and their children, my grandchildren, barely knew me beyond birthday cards and Christmas gifts. But this invitation felt different, genuine, like maybe I mattered to them as more than just a convenient babysitter or emergency fund. I booked my flight from Cedar Rapids to Phoenix the very next morning, spending for $100 I couldn't really afford on a last-minute ticket. The excitement bubbled up inside me like I was a teenager again, planning my first big adventure. I went shopping for gifts, carefully selecting a beautiful scarf for Sarah, a new toolkit for David, and special toys for 8-year-old Tommy and -1-year-old Lisa. I even bought a new dress, navy blue with tiny flowers, because I wanted to look nice for our family dinner. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving crawled by as I imagined us laughing around their dining table, sharing stories, creating the kind of memories I'd been craving for decades. The morning of my flight, I woke up at 4 a.m., too excited to sleep. I double-checked my boarding pass, made sure my gifts were wrapped perfectly, and called a taxi to take me to the airport during the 3-hour flight. I stared out the window at the clouds and pictured David's face when he saw me walking through the terminal. Maybe he'd hug me the way he used to when he was little, before life got complicated, before Sarah, before I became more of an obligation than a mother. I practiced conversations in my head, imagining how I'd compliment Sarah's cooking and ask the kids about school. This was going to be different. This was going to be the Thanksgiving that brought us back together. Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport buzzed with holiday travelers when I landed at 2:30 p.m. I collected my small suitcase and the bag of gifts, then made my way to the pickup area, where David had promised to meet me. The Arizona sun felt warm on my face after Iowa's November chill, and I smiled at families reuniting around me, hugging and laughing as they loaded into cars. I checked my phone with no messages. David was probably just running a few minutes late. Phoenix traffic could be unpredictable. I found a bench and settled in to wait, watching the steady stream of cars and feeling grateful that soon I'd be in one of them, heading to my son's house for a real family celebration. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. I called David's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi honey, I'm here at the airport waiting for you. No rush, just wanted you to know I landed safely." I tried Sarah's number next, but got the same automated message. Maybe they were both in the car together, driving to get me, and couldn't answer. I told myself not to worry, that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Families get busy during holidays, things come up. I bought a bottle of water from a nearby vendor and returned to my bench, watching the sun begin its descent toward the desert horizon. 2 hours turned into 3. The airport crowd thinned as people found their rides and headed home to their Celebrations, I called David again, then Sarah, then David once more. My cheerful messages gradually became more concerned. David, it's Mom again. I'm still at the airport. Please call me back. The bench felt harder against my back, and my feet ached in the new shoes I'd worn to look nice. A security guard walked by and gave me a sympathetic look, probably wondering why an elderly woman was sitting alone with luggage while everyone else went home to their families. As the 4th hour approached, I pulled out my phone to check Facebook, hoping maybe David had posted something that would explain the delay. What I saw made my blood freeze in my veins. There, posted just 20 minutes earlier, was a photo from Sarah's account, their beautifully set Thanksgiving table, David carving the turkey, Sarah laughing with a glass of wine, Tommy and Lisa wearing the paper pilgrim hats I'd sent them last year. The caption read, "So grateful for family time, blessed Thanksgiving 2023. They were already eating dinner, without me. They had forgotten I existed. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred with tears. I refused to let it fall in public. The turkey looked golden and perfect. The table decorated with autumn leaves and candles, everyone dressed nicely and smiling. It was exactly the scene I'd imagined being part of, except I wasn't in it. I wasn't even a thought in their minds. While I sat alone on a hard airport bench, clutching gifts I'd bought with love. They were creating memories without me. The invitation that had felt so warm and genuine now revealed itself as empty words, probably spoken without any real intention of follow-through. The airport terminal had grown quiet around me. Most travelers long gone to their warm family gatherings. I sat there for another hour, not because I expected David to show up, but because I needed time to process what had just happened. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as janitors began their evening cleaning routines. And I realized I was probably the saddest sight they'd see all night, an old woman abandoned on Thanksgiving, till clutching a bag of gifts for people who couldn't even remember she existed. Finally, I stood up, my joints stiff from sitting so long, and walked outside to hail a taxi. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked, and I almost laughed at the question. Where does someone go when they've been erased from their own family's holiday? "Just take me to a diner," I said, "somewhere that's open on Thanksgiving." He drove me to Mel's all-night diner on the outskirts of town. A place with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look tired. I ordered turkey and mashed potatoes from a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, and ate my Thanksgiving dinner alone while truckers and other displaced souls sat at nearby tables. All of us united in our holiday loneliness. The pie was a surprisingly good apple with a flaky crust that reminded me of the ones I used to make for David when he was young. I ate every bite slowly, savoring not just the sweetness but the clarity that was settling over me like morning fog lifting from a lake. This wasn't just about a forgotten airport pickup. This was about years of being taken for granted, of being valued only for what I could provide rather than who I was. I thought about all the times I'd sent money when David's business struggled, all the birthday parties I'd attended where I felt like an outsider, all the phone calls that only came when they needed something. After dinner, I checked into a nearby motel, a clean but basic place that charged $49 a night. The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and had a painting of desert cacti bolted to the wall, but it was mine for the night, and that felt like freedom. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the small notebook I always carried, the one where I wrote down grocery lists and appointment reminders. On a fresh page, I wrote 3 words that would change everything. I am not spare. Not spare parts to be used when convenient, not spare change to be counted on in emergencies. Not a spare person to be forgotten when real life gets busy. The next morning, I didn't fly home to Iowa. Instead, I took a taxi to the nearest bank branch and asked to speak with a manager. I need to stop all automatic payments to my son, I told the surprised woman behind the desk. For 3 years, I'd been automatically transferring $500 monthly to David's account, helping with his mortgage, his kids' activities, and his life. I also need to revoke his power of attorney. The paperwork took 2 hours, but with each signature, I felt lighter. Like I was shedding weights I'd been carrying for decades without realizing how heavy they'd become. My next stop was a lawyer's office I found in the phone book. The attorney, a kind woman named Patricia Rodriguez, listened to my story without judgment and helped me revise my will that very afternoon. Everything I'd planned to leave David with, my house, my savings, my small but meaningful collection of antique jewelry, would now go to my granddaughter Emma, David's sister's child, who lived in Colorado and still called me every Sunday just to chat. Emma was 22, working her way through nursing school, and she treated me like I mattered, not like I was an obligation or an ATM. David finally called that evening as I sat in my motel room, eating Chinese takeout and watching the news. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice carrying that practiced tone of someone who'd been caught doing something wrong. "Sarah had a migraine, and I had to take her to urgent care. And then the kids were crying, and my phone died, and by the time we got home, the excuses poured out like water from a broken dam, each one more pathetic than the last." I let him finish, then said simply, "David, I saw the Facebook photo. You were eating dinner while I sat at the airport." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, he tried a different approach. "Look, why don't you come over tomorrow? We'll do a make-up Thanksgiving, just for you, just for me." Like I was a consolation prize, a problem to be solved with leftover turkey and forced smiles. "No thank you," I said. "I'm flying home tomorrow." But I wasn't the same woman who had flown to Phoenix full of hope. I was someone who had finally learned the difference between being wanted and being convenient. Sarah showed up at my house in Cedar Rapids 2 weeks later, her face tight with the kind of anger that comes from losing access to easy money. "Margaret, you're being unreasonable," she said, standing in my living room like she owned it. "David made a mistake, but you're punishing the whole family. What about Tommy and Lisa? They love their grandmother." I almost laughed at the manipulation. "Sarah," I said calmly, "Tommy and Lisa barely know me. When's the last time they called just to say hello? When's the last time you invited me over when you didn't need something?" She left without answering, slamming my front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Emma visited the following weekend, driving 6 hours from Denver just to spend Saturday afternoon with me. We baked cookies together, watched old movies, and talked about her classes and her boyfriend and her dreams of working in pediatric nursing. She never once asked about money or favors or what I could do for her. She just wanted to be with me, and I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like: easy, natural, loving without conditions. "Grandma," she said as she was leaving, "I don't know what happened with Dad, but I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. You deserve better." When David called a month later, furious about discovering the changes to my will, I was ready for him. "You can't just cut me out of your life because of one mistake," he said, his voice rising with panic and anger. "You mean the pattern," I replied calmly. "The forgetting, the late calls, the missing birthdays, the airport, the photo. That wasn't intentional." "No," I said, and my voice was steady as stone. "It was worse. It was convenient." I hung up the phone and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Today, I wake up every morning in my own house, make my own coffee, and decide how to spend my own day. I volunteer at the library, tend my garden, and video chat with Emma twice a week. I've learned that love isn't about what you can provide or how useful you are. It's about being seen, being valued. Being remembered, sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the permission to stop accepting less than you deserve. Moral lesson: your worth isn't measured by others' convenience. Choose people who choose you. Create boundaries that protect your peace, and never apologize for demanding the love you've always freely given. You are not spare, you are essential, valuable, and deserving of genuine affection.